everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight for another Tech Talk. We have Carlos Botero-Vargas with us here today talking about React Router. Take it away, Carlos.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jordan, for the introduction. Thank you for everyone who is attending today. And I would like to start by saying thank you to SingleSprout for sponsoring this Tech Talk. We are going to dive deeply into React Router today. My name, in case you are not familiar with me, is Carlos Andres Botero-Vargas, and I am part of the best cohort that Fitri will ever produce, the very first one. So let's dive deep into React Router. The current latest version is version number 5, even though for the last year version 6 has been in alpha. Therefore, we are not going to go into the minute details that version 6 offers to us. We're going to concentrate in the version that everyone uses. There is going to be 3 areas that we're going to discuss. What is React Router? Basic operations. Why? And then the reason why is that we need to use it or want to use it, and how is that this wonderful hook and set of libraries are actually going to make our lives as the developers when we are working with React much better. Let's start with the what. React Router is the standard routing library for React. Whenever we are going to download or introduce it into our environment when we're developing, we are going to be calling React Router DOM, which by extension calls the React Router library as a dependency. But as you can see, the weekly downloads already tell us not only how important it is for everyone working in an environment created in React, but also how useful it is. With over 3 million downloads per week, I am convinced this is the way into the future. Let's talk about the who made this. And because sometimes we forget those creators, Ryan Florence and Michael Jackson. I have to confess, I was expecting a different sort of picture when I saw that name, but these are the 2 gentlemen that actually created React Router and React Router DOM, and they actually have a complete site for education and into preparation with documentation for it. When we are talking about React Router, we need to clarify what is the idea of the single page application. Whenever we are working with traditional HTML, we need to use the A tag, the anchor tag, 1 page per each of the URLs. So we go and hop from one to the other. That is how routing traditionally happens in a website. In the case when we are working with React, we have the opportunity to instead use a component that we are going to call from now on the link. The same URL will remain in the entire page, but certain aspects of it, certain components, certain parts of the DOM are going to be re-rendering depending of where we are. And this is where React and React Router become so important and so necessary for us as developers facing the future. We need to reason with the DOM. This is the traditional setup of our React app. And when we are ready to actually render our application, then we are going to call the component, the app. But as you can notice in this image that I took and I brought it up for you, the component is going to be wrapped in the router as a path. Therefore, it is going to only be rendered in the screen once we are going there. And that is what the definition of dynamic rendering. And that is the main aspect of React Router, the powerful aspect that React Router has for us. Now, we're discussing why are we using React Router. First, React changes the page without updating the URL. We remain the single page, or if we need, we go to a different one. But because we are inside that wrapper, we can render the information without translating over other places, and therefore minimize the calls to the back end and therefore maximize the user experience. Routing is ubiquitous. Most web frameworks, Express, Angular, Ember, etc., they have routing, but traditionally that routing is static. So the difference with React Router is that it's dynamic. Here's an example with Express. We need to clarify each of those routes when we are working with a static system of routing. With React and React Router specifically, we can make it dynamic. What is that, the importance of it? And it is so we can actually help the SEO, search engine optimization, making organic, uplifting our place, our site into search engines, and therefore giving us more visibility. A little bit on this later on, but there are tools that we can use in order to verify that our single page application actually complies with all these search engine optimization policies. But I hope we have time at the end to discuss this. In terms of dynamic routing, it truly means that the routing happens when the page or the app is being rendered. As you can see in the example below, the component dashboard is only going to be rendered when we click on that link dashboard. When the path and the actual direction of the component match, therefore the component is rendered, which means that the page is actually pre-rendered, accelerating the experience for the user. We are all going to improve the user experience. The question is, why if we have 100 components? I understand our juniors are right now dealing with React and the tic-tac-toe. The component number might not be so big, but what if you have a enormous collection of components and you need to make them work in the single page? And what if those components actually need to talk to each other? This is where React Router is going to facilitate our life. How? And this is a little collection of interesting features that we find, or I found in my research, that React Router offers to us, for all of us that are developing React applications. For instance, location. It records where the app is now, where it wants to go, interestingly enough, where it was. More of that in a little example I prepare for you in a few seconds. The use params, because it's a component and because we can pass props into that component, we can send information into the component that is going to be rendered. Therefore, these key value pairs are going to feed information into the next component. And that's what it means, the dynamic rendering that we were discussing earlier. As you can see in the middle of the page, the route, the path includes the information on the specific slug in the entry in the block that I need to show on render. Therefore, this routing is already offering all the information that my next component needs to render. It makes it easier to deal with. Redirect, it will navigate to a new location or object. It also has the possibility to switch the entire URL, therefore switching to a new section of our application. And then because it's truly passing an object, you can include as much information as you need in order to rendering the next component. And because the prompt will be called with the next location, we can also include information on inside the HTML that that the user might be reacting to. In this case, it is a question. Are you sure you want to go? And did you see the location and path name is also dynamic. So it will not necessarily need to build a new page, a new code for each of the pages that you have. You can use the same one. You can reuse it. Therefore, we are using the dry principle of writing. And we arrive to the demo time because I am convinced routing can be exciting too. And then I created this little application so that I can demonstrate to all of you what is it that we're doing. Is basically going directions on how the next page is going to be rendered. So if I click left, the next page is going to be rendered on the left. If I click right, the next page is going to be right. But the same will happen with the top, and the same will happen with the bottom. But you notice that the color of the page is being passed in with each of the clicks of this router. We can switch the transitions. So those transitions are going to be different, and we can click it in any order. The actual information that the router is passing into will tell the page how the transition needs to be, but also what is the background color of this new page. And because of this, the information is being actively rendered once we are routing. And this is the bit of history that I wanted to share with you. Every single step that we have been into, it is already saved into the browser. So we are not only being able to render pages dynamically, but we are accommodating all the needs of a regular transition in a website, and therefore having an impact in the search engine optimization. That is for the demo. So allow me to go through briefly, ever so briefly, through a summary. React Router, and this is the important piece of information, is a dynamic client-side routing. Again, the more that we can minimize the calls to the backend, the faster the experience, or the better, improved experience for the user. And at the same time, we're saving ourselves a little bit of heavy weight to be lifted from the backend to the front end. The modern method to improve user experience, it is, as we saw at the beginning, used extensively each week. With the number of downloads tells us everything. React uses component structure to call components, and that information that is being passed through as a prop is actually being informed the new page of what it needs to be rendering. React Router can delegate the rendering to other components, calling them in, or in turn, using the information that you have passing in. The browser history is preserved, and this will be important place in case we need to interact with different parts of the web in itself. And you can use those properties to do logic, fill values, and even perform queries. So the React Router can act as a query loader in advance, and therefore speeding up all the process. And at the end, all of this, we're doing it for the benefit of our users and to make our experience as developers also smoother, or as smooth as it can be. This is the information I have prepared for you. I thank you very much. I hope that you enjoyed and everyone is ready to keep insisting on incorporating React Router in all your React applications. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos, for that fantastic breakdown on React Router. Does anyone want to ask Carlos any questions? I see Eric has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Carlos, could you just talk a little bit more about the SEO optimization? I know you had, you said you wanted to touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's the limitation of time. Thank you. Wonderful question. The SEO optimization was actually created for non-dynamic web page, for the HTML. So the robots in Google that actually are crawling the entire web, they go and render each of the page that everyone has in their website. When you create a one-page application, and therefore are using React and React Router, you have to actually make an extra effort to make sure that those robots can render your pages. And that information, of course, can be included as a prop. And those are the tools, Lighthouse, for instance, that is already built into the dev tools that Chrome's bring in, will help identifying which are the weaker points that are of your routing. But it's an important question because we think that we're making it faster using React Router, and perhaps we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We are ignoring how is that Google is going to check, or any search engine is going to check that our website includes the information we say it includes.
Fantastic. Does anyone else? I see Grigor. Do you have a question?
Yes, I'm not sure if you have enough time for that, but I was just curious. Are you also able to preserve states within the router, or preserve the state when you change, when you go to a different page, then come back and still have the same state within that page?
There's information that because you're passing from one component to the next one, you can preserve it. But React Router was actually intending to go in tandem with Redux. So the state will be used where any use state management, and React Router will exclusively handle this routing. But because you can pass so many props through the routing, there is information that you can keep in it. Although in the documentation, it actually requires that you have a state management in place and not relying exclusively on React Router.
Thank you.
Excellent question.
Great. I think we have time maybe for one more. Vanessa, do you have a question?
So I was wondering with React Router specifically, is it actually faster for the Googlebot to crawl your pages?
Once you have set it up correctly, it goes faster. And at the same time, it's set up for spending 20 seconds in each of the websites. So as much information I can run in, it will wait for 20 seconds before it accepts or not the information. The tests I don't think they are as conclusive, and it depends, of course, on how you set up that router. So as much as you're thinking in optimization, the React router will make it better, but not necessarily, because if you didn't, then the HTML will do a much better job for the robot specifically.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. Those were thorough and wonderful questions. Before we end this, let's give Carlos a tremendous round of applause. That was excellent, excellent, excellent.